I've spent 55 years learning how to disappear. Not physically, though sometimes I wish I could, but in the way that matters most. The way where you're standing right in front of someone, speaking words that should mean something, and yet they look through you like you're made of glass, like you're already a ghost haunting the edges of their busy, important lives. My name is Lena, and I need to tell you something I've kept buried for far too long. Maybe you'll understand. Maybe you've felt it too. That particular kind of pain that doesn't announce itself with screaming or tears, but settles into your bones like winter cold, the kind that never quite leaves even when spring arrives. It started, I suppose, the day my husband died. No, that's not quite right. It started before that, but his death made it impossible to ignore anymore. Thomas was my buffer, my translator in a world that had slowly stopped speaking my language. When he was alive, I was part of something, a wife, a mother, a woman with a place at the table. After he was gone, I became optional. The funeral was crowded. People I hadn't seen in years came to pay their respects, to grip my hand with solemn faces and tell me how sorry they were. My son, Daniel, stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders in a way that should have felt comforting but mostly felt performative, like he was showing everyone what a good son he was, playing the role expected of him. I remember thinking even then that something had shifted, the way he checked his phone during the service, the way his wife, Amanda, kept glancing at her watch, the way my grandson, little Marcus, though he's 12 now, hardly little anymore, played games on his tablet in the front pew while the pastor spoke about eternal rest and the mercy of God. But I told myself I was being unfair. They were grieving too. They had their own pain to manage. Who was I to judge how they processed loss? If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. And leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. It helps me know who's listening. 3 months after the funeral, they invited me to Sunday dinner. I was so grateful. I spent all of Saturday preparing Daniel's favorite dessert, the lemon cake I used to make for his birthdays, back when birthdays were events that mattered, back when I was the center of his world instead of a distant obligation on the periphery. I arrived 15 minutes early, cake carefully balanced in my hands, wearing the blue dress I'd saved for special occasions. The one Thomas always said brought out my eyes. Daniel answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Oh, Mom. Right. Sunday dinner. I totally forgot. He didn't move aside to let me in, just stood there in the doorway, blocking my entry into his home, the home I'd helped them buy with the money Thomas left me, the down payment that made their suburban dream possible. I can come back later? I offered, my voice small, the cake suddenly heavy in my trembling hands. Actually, Amanda's not feeling well, and Marcus has a friend over. Maybe we should reschedule. I'll call you. He smiled, that apologetic smile I'd seen him use on telemarketers and door-to-door salesmen, and gently closed the door before I could respond. I stood on his porch for a full minute, holding that lemon cake, listening to laughter coming from inside the house. Marcus wasn't sick. Amanda was fine. I could hear them, clear as day, the sounds of a family enjoying their Sunday together, just not with me. I drove home with the cake on the passenger seat, and halfway there, I pulled into an empty parking lot and cried until my throat was raw. Not because of the canceled dinner, though that hurt, but because of how easily he'd lied, how little effort it took for him to dismiss me. That was 2 years ago. 2 years of increasingly transparent excuses. 2 years of feeling myself fade from their lives like an old photograph left too long in the sun. But I kept trying. God help me. I kept trying. I showed up at Marcus's baseball games, sitting alone in the bleachers while other grandparents clustered together, cheering and taking photos. I waved at Amanda when she arrived, always late, always distracted by her phone. She'd give me a quick nod, barely a smile, then find a seat on the opposite side of the field. I sent birthday cards with money I couldn't really afford to spend, money from my modest widow's pension that was supposed to cover groceries and utilities and the occasional treat for myself. Marcus never called to thank me. I'm not even sure he opened them. I volunteered to babysit. "We've got it covered," Amanda would say, her voice sugary with false sweetness. "We don't want to burden you." But I'd see their social media posts. Date nights, weekend getaways, Marcus staying with Amanda's mother, the woman who apparently wasn't a burden. Every December, they went on a cruise. It became their tradition after Thomas died. Their way of celebrating family, Daniel explained the first year. Just the three of them, sailing to warm places with blue water and white sand beaches, places I'd only seen in magazines. The first year, I helped them pack. I folded Marcus's clothes and made sure they had sunscreen and reminded Amanda about their passports. I stood in their driveway and waved as they drove away, my breath making small clouds in the cold air, my smile frozen on my face until their car disappeared around the corner. Then I went home to my empty apartment and spent Christmas alone. I told myself it was fine. They needed time together. They'd had a hard year. I was being selfish to want to be included. The second year, I wasn't invited to help them pack, but Daniel called me the night before they left. "Just wanted to say we're heading out tomorrow," he said, his voice cheerful. "Wish us luck." "Have a wonderful time," I told him. And I meant it. I really did. "Take lots of pictures." "Will do, Mom. Love you." Those words should have felt like something. Instead, they felt like the verbal equivalent of patting someone on the head while walking away. I spent that Christmas volunteering at a soup kitchen, ladling out hot meals to people who had even less than I did. At least there, I felt useful. At least there, someone was glad I showed up. The third year, they didn't call before they left. I found out they were gone because Marcus posted a photo from the ship on social media, him and his parents, suntanned and grinning, tropical drinks in their hands, the caption reading, "Best family vacation ever. Blessed our family time, our cruise life." I stared at that photo for hours, zooming in on their faces, searching for some sign that they'd thought of me even for a moment, that somewhere in all that happiness, they'd felt even a flicker of guilt about the woman who'd given up everything so Daniel could have a better life than she'd had. Nothing. Just three people who looked perfectly content without me. This year, I finally found the courage to ask. It was September, 3 months before their usual cruise. I'd rehearsed what I would say for weeks, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to find the right words that wouldn't sound needy or desperate or pathetic. I called Daniel on a Tuesday evening after dinner, when I thought he might be relaxed and receptive. "Hey, Mom," he answered, and I could hear a television in the background, the sounds of some action movie drowning out whatever warmth might have been in his voice. "Hi, sweetheart. I hope I'm not interrupting?" "No, just watching TV. What's up?" My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "I wanted to ask you something about your Christmas plans." Silence. Then, "Okay, I know you've been doing these cruises and they sound wonderful, and I'm so happy you've found something that brings your family joy." I was rambling. I forced myself to slow down. "I was wondering if maybe this year I could join you. I've been saving up, and I could pay my own way, of course. I wouldn't be a burden financially. I just thought it might be nice to spend the holidays together, as a family." The silence that followed felt like falling. "Mom," he finally said, and I could hear him moving to another room, lowering his voice. "This trip, it's kind of our thing, you know? Just me, Amanda, and Marcus." "I know, but I thought, and honestly, it's expensive. Really expensive. We've got it budgeted perfectly for 3 people. Adding another person would throw everything off." I said I'd pay for myself. "It's not just about money, Mom." His voice had taken on an edge now, that particular tone of irritation that said I was being difficult, unreasonable. "It's about the dynamic. We've got our routines, our reservations, everything planned. It would be complicated." I should have stopped there. I should have said, "Of course I understand," and hung up and pretended my heart wasn't breaking into pieces so small I'd never be able to put them back together. But something in me, some small, stubborn part that remembered I was once a woman who mattered, made me push one more time. "Daniel, I'm your mother. I know that, Mom. I've never asked to come before. I've never complained about spending the holidays alone. I've supported your family trips. I've been happy for you. I'm asking for this one thing, to be part of your family Christmas. Just once." The sigh he let out was so heavy, so laden with exasperation, that I felt myself physically recoil from the phone. "Mom, look, this cruise is for family. Just family. You're my mother, and I love you. But this particular trip, it's not the right fit. Maybe we can do something else another time. Take you out for dinner or something when we get back." The words hung in the air between us, and I knew with absolute certainty that he didn't hear what he'd just said, that he didn't understand he'd just told me I wasn't family. "Okay," I whispered. "Great. Thanks for understanding. We'll catch up soon, all right? Love you." He hung up before I could respond. I sat on my couch for the rest of the evening, holding the phone, replaying those words over and over in my mind. This cruise is for family. Just family. And somewhere in the darkness of my small apartment, in the silence broken only by the ticking of the clock Thomas gave me on our 20th anniversary, something inside me finally broke open. Not my heart. That would have been too clean, too simple. It was the part of me that had been holding on to hope, the part that believed if I was patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough, I would eventually earn back my place in their lives. That part died that night. And in its place, something new began to grow, something quieter, fiercer, something that whispered, after 55 years of learning how to disappear, maybe it was time to learn how to be seen again. Not by them, by myself. October arrived with cold rain and the kind of gray skies that matched the color my life had become. I went through my days like a woman underwater, everything muffled, distant, requiring twice the effort it should have taken to accomplish the simplest tasks. I worked 3 mornings a week at the library, shelving books and helping elderly patrons navigate the computer system. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was elderly too, 65 looming just around the corner, though I'd never quite accepted that designation. Elderly was for other people, people who'd lived full lives and were now coasting on memories and grandchildren's visits. I had memories. What I didn't have were the grandchildren's visits. The library was quiet on Tuesdays. Mrs. Chen came in for her mystery novels, always 3 at a time, always returning them exactly 1 week later. Mr. Patterson spent hours reading newspapers from cities he'd lived in decades ago, chasing ghosts of a younger self. And there was Sarah, a woman about my age who came every Tuesday not for books, but for companionship. "You look tired today," Sarah said, settling into the chair beside the checkout desk where I was processing returned books. "Just didn't sleep well," I lied. The truth was I'd been up until 3 in the morning scrolling through Amanda's social media, torturing myself with photos of their perfect life without me. Sarah studied my face with the kind of knowing look that made me uncomfortable. "Lena, honey, how long have we known each other? 4 years? 5? 5 years. 2 months. Long enough for me to know when you're lying." She leaned forward, her voice gentle. "What's really wrong?" I don't know why I told her. Maybe because she was practically a stranger. Someone who existed only in this building, on Tuesdays, in a space separate from the rest of my failing life. Maybe because holding it inside was becoming physically painful, like swallowing glass. "My son doesn't want me on their family cruise," I said quietly, not looking at her. "He said it's only for family." The silence that followed made me look up. Sarah's face had gone still, her eyes bright with something that looked like anger on my behalf. "He said what?" "It's fine. I understand. They have their routines and I'd just complicate things." "Lena." Sarah's voice was sharp now, cutting through my practiced excuses. "Listen to yourself. You're making excuses for someone who just told you that you're not part of his family. You, the woman who raised him, who sacrificed for him, who probably gave up more than I can imagine so he could have everything he needed." Her words hit me like cold water. "It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" She reached across and took my hand, her grip firm. "My daughter did something similar to me. Different circumstances, same message. It took me 2 years and a good therapist to realize that their failure to value you doesn't diminish your worth. It reveals their character, not yours." I pulled my hand back, suddenly defensive. "Daniel's not a bad person. He's busy. He has his own family to think about. So do you. You're his family. You're Marcus's family. When did you stop being important enough to matter?" I couldn't answer, because tears were already streaming down my face, hot and shameful, dripping onto the circulation desk, while Mrs. Chen pretended very hard not to notice from the mystery section. Sarah didn't say anything else. She just sat with me while I cried, occasionally pushing a tissue box closer, her presence somehow making the grief feel less pathetic than it had when I experienced it alone in my apartment. When I finally stopped, embarrassed and exhausted, she spoke again. Have you ever done anything just for yourself? Not for Daniel, not for Marcus, not because it was practical or responsible, just for you? I don't know what you mean. When was the last time you took a trip? Went somewhere you wanted to go? I had to think about it. Really think. Thomas and I went to Niagara Falls for our anniversary. 15 years ago. Sarah's expression was part sadness, part frustration. 15 years. And in all that time, you've just been waiting? Hoping? I've been living my life, I protested weakly. Have you, though? That question haunted me for weeks. Have you, though? I'd wake up at 2 in the morning with those words echoing in my head, looking around my small bedroom. The same furniture I'd had for 20 years. The same curtains. The same framed photo of Daniel's high school graduation on my nightstand, frozen in time when he still smiled at me like I mattered. November came, and with it, the first real snow. I watched from my window as families in my building prepared for Thanksgiving. Cars loaded with suitcases, children bundled in winter coats, everyone going somewhere, to someone, part of something larger than themselves. Daniel called on Thanksgiving morning, not to invite me over. That ship had sailed years ago. Amanda's mother hosted now, in her large house with the dining room that sat 12. I'd seen the photos on social media, the elaborate table settings and the golden turkey and all those smiling faces that didn't include mine. Just calling to say Happy Thanksgiving, Mom, Daniel said, his voice overly cheerful in that way that told me he was checking a box, fulfilling an obligation. Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. Are you at Amanda's mother's house? Yeah, we're just about to eat. The place is packed. Her whole family's here, plus some cousins from out of state. It's chaos. He laughed, fond and warm, and I felt something twist in my chest. That sounds wonderful, I said, meaning it and hating that I meant it. Give Marcus a hug from Grandma. Will do. What are you up to today? The lie came easily, practiced from years of protecting his feelings from my reality. Oh, Mrs. Chen from the library invited me over. Should be nice. That's great, Mom. Really great. Well, Amanda's calling me. Looks like the turkey's ready. Love you. Love you too. I spent Thanksgiving eating a turkey sandwich from the deli downstairs and watching old movies, the kind where families reconciled at the end and everyone learned valuable lessons about what truly mattered, the kind that bore no resemblance to real life. That evening, I did something I'd been avoiding. I opened my laptop and looked at my bank account. $37,412. It had taken me years to save this much, putting away small amounts from my library salary, living frugally, denying myself the small luxuries that made life feel less like merely surviving. Thomas's life insurance had been mostly eaten up by funeral expenses and the down payment for Daniel's house, but I'd managed to save what little remained. I'd been saving it for emergencies, for medical bills or home repairs, or helping Daniel if he ever needed it, for being the kind of mother who could help, who had value, who couldn't be dismissed because she still had something to offer. But what if the emergency was now? What if I was the one who needed help? Sarah's question came back to me. Have you ever done anything just for yourself? I closed the laptop and walked to my bookshelf, pulling down an old atlas Thomas had bought years ago. The pages were yellowed, the maps probably outdated, but the places were still there. Paris, Tokyo, Rome, Cairo, places I'd dreamed about when I was younger, back when the future felt infinite and full of possibility. When had I stopped believing in possibility? The next Tuesday, I arrived at the library to find Sarah waiting for me, practically bouncing with excitement. I did something, she announced before I could even take off my coat. And you're going to think I'm crazy, but hear me out. She pulled me to a quiet corner and handed me a brochure. It was glossy and expensive looking, showing images of exotic locations and smiling travelers. My niece works for a travel agency, Sarah explained rapidly. I told her about you, don't be mad, and she said she specializes in solo travel for mature women. She's got this whole thing about empowering women to see the world on their own terms. I stared at the brochure. A woman about my age stood at the edge of a cliff somewhere, her arms spread wide, her face lifted to the sun. She looked free in a way I couldn't quite comprehend. Sarah, I can't. Why not? Because I fumbled for reasons. Because I'm saving that money. Because traveling alone is dangerous. Because I'm too old to start gallivanting around the world like some college kid on a gap year. Sarah's expression softened. Or because you're still hoping Daniel will change his mind and invite you on that cruise. The accuracy of her observation stung. He won't, she continued gently. Not this year. Probably not next year. Maybe never. And you can spend the rest of your life waiting for him to give you permission to be happy. Or you can give yourself that permission. It's not about permission, isn't it? She pushed the brochure closer. My niece's name is Clara. She's expecting your call. Just talk to her. That's all I'm asking. Just talk to her and see what's possible. I took the brochure home and put it on my refrigerator, held there by a magnet shaped like a lighthouse that Daniel had given me years ago from some family vacation I hadn't been invited to. For 3 days, I walked past it without looking at it directly, like it was something dangerous that might explode if I acknowledged its presence. On the 4th day, December 1st, I saw Amanda post photos from their cruise booking confirmation. They were going to the Caribbean again. 7 days, 4 islands, making more amazing memories with our little family. Heart emojis, sunshine emojis. A comment from Amanda's mother. So exciting. Make sure to take lots of pictures. I stared at that post until my vision blurred. Their little family. Not ours. Theirs. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the brochure before I could talk myself out of it. Wanderlust Travel. This is Clara speaking. My voice shook. Hi. My name is Lena Morrison. Sarah gave me your number. She said you help women like me, travel. Ms. Morrison. Yes, my aunt told me about you. I'm so glad you called. Her voice was warm, enthusiastic. Tell me, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be? I opened my mouth to say something practical, something reasonable and affordable and appropriate for a woman my age. Instead, I heard myself whisper, everywhere. I want to go everywhere. The silence on the other end lasted just long enough for me to feel foolish. Then Clara laughed, delighted. Then let's make that happen. When can you come in to talk about building your dream itinerary? I made an appointment for the next day, hung up, and stood in my kitchen, trembling. What was I doing? This was insane. 55-year-old widows didn't just decide to travel the world on a whim. They didn't spend their emergency savings on adventures. They stayed home and waited and hoped and eventually died without ever having lived. But that night, I took the cruise photo off my refrigerator, the one from 3 years ago that I'd kept there like a shrine to inclusion, and threw it in the trash. The lighthouse magnet I kept. I'd need something to hold all the postcards I was going to send myself from places Daniel had never bothered to take me, from places I was going to take myself. December had always felt like an ending. But as I lay in bed that night staring at my ceiling, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, it could be a beginning instead. Not for them. Not for the family that had forgotten I existed. For me. Clara's office was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined something corporate and intimidating. All glass walls and uncomfortable chairs designed to make clients feel small. Instead, I walked into what felt like someone's living room. Warm lighting, comfortable couches, and walls covered with photographs of women my age standing in front of pyramids, temples, mountains, oceans. Women who looked like they belonged in those places. Women who looked alive. Lena! Clara stood up from behind a desk cluttered with maps and travel guides, extending her hand. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and an energy that made me feel both welcomed and slightly exhausted. I'm so happy to meet you. Sarah talks about you constantly. Please sit. Can I get you tea? Coffee? I'm fine, thank you. I perched on the edge of a chair covered in fabric that looked like it had come from Morocco or somewhere equally exotic. I should tell you, I've never done anything like this before. I don't really know what I'm doing here. Clara smiled and settled into the chair across from me. Most of my clients say exactly that during our first meeting. Then they come back from their trips and tell me it was the best decision they ever made. She pulled out a notepad. So let's start simple. You told me on the phone you wanted to go everywhere. Let's talk about what everywhere means to you. I hesitated, feeling foolish. I don't even know where to begin. Then let's begin with why. Why now? What made you pick up the phone yesterday? The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to give her some sanitized version of the truth, but something about her expression, patient, genuinely curious, without judgment, made me tell the real story. My son told me I couldn't come on their family cruise because it's only for family. I'm his mother, and apparently that doesn't qualify anymore. The words came out bitter, and I immediately felt ashamed. I'm sorry. That sounds pathetic. It sounds honest, Clara said quietly, and painful. I'm sorry that happened to you. Those simple words, I'm sorry that happened to you, hit me harder than they should have. Daniel had never apologized. Amanda had never acknowledged the hurt. Even I had been making excuses for them, protecting them from the consequences of their cruelty. But this stranger, this woman who owed me nothing, offered the sympathy I'd been starving for. I started crying again. I seemed to do that a lot lately. Clara pushed a box of tissues across the coffee table and waited until I composed myself. Here's what I've learned from doing this work, she said. People come to me for a lot of reasons. Some want adventure. Some are running from something. Some are searching for something. But the ones who have the most transformative experiences, they're the ones who are finally choosing themselves. I don't know if I know how to do that, I admitted. Then let's learn together. She pulled out a large world map and spread it across the table between us. Point to anywhere. Anywhere at all. Don't think about it. Just point. I looked at the map, at all those colors and borders and names of places I'd only read about. My finger hovered, then landed on a cluster of islands. Greece, Clara said, leaning forward. Interesting choice. What drew you there? I don't know. It just looked beautiful. It is. The light there is different from anywhere else in the world. The water is so blue it doesn't look real. And the history, you can stand where Socrates stood, walk where ancient civilizations built empires. She was already making notes. What else? Don't think. Just point. I pointed again. Japan, then France, then Egypt, then somewhere in South America I couldn't even name. With each place I chose, Clara asked questions. What had I heard about it? What did I imagine doing there? How did I picture myself in those spaces? And slowly, without realizing it was happening, I began to see myself, not as Daniel's mother or Thomas's widow or the library volunteer who shelved books on Tuesday mornings, just as Lena, a woman who wanted to see the Eiffel Tower at sunset and taste real gelato in Rome, and watch the sunrise from a mountain in Peru. How much time do you have? Clara asked after we'd covered half the map with possibilities. Time? Are you working full-time? Do you have obligations that would prevent you from traveling for an extended period? I thought about my life. The library job that was more about filling empty days than financial necessity. The apartment that held nothing but memories of a life that no longer existed. The phone that rarely rang with calls I wanted to receive. I have nothing but time, I said. And the truth of it was both devastating and liberating. Clara grinned. Then let's do this right. I'm not talking about a week in Cancun. I'm talking about real travel. 3 months? 6 months? However long you want. A journey, not a vacation. I can't afford 6 months of travel? You'd be surprised. There are ways to travel affordably if you're willing to be flexible. Stay in hostels instead of hotels. Take trains instead of planes when possible. Eat where locals eat instead of tourist traps. She pulled out her calculator. How much were you thinking of spending? I told her about my savings, expecting her to laugh or tell me it wasn't enough. Instead, her eyes lit up. We can work with this. Absolutely. She started sketching out a rough itinerary, talking rapidly about routes and seasons and places where the dollar stretched further. If we're strategic, you could travel for 4 to 5 months on your budget, see a dozen countries, experience things you never imagined. 4 months. 4 months of being somewhere other than my small apartment, waiting for a phone call that never came. 4 months of not checking social media to see what family events I wasn't invited to. 4 months of belonging to myself. I need to think about it, I said, even though something in me was already decided. Clara handed me a folder filled with information. Sample itineraries, budget breakdowns, testimonials from other women who'd taken similar journeys. Take your time, but Lena, don't take too long. Life has a way of making us wait forever if we let it. I left her office in a daze, clutching the folder like it was something precious. On the drive home, I passed Daniel's house. His car was in the driveway, along with Amanda's SUV. I could see lights on in the living room, could imagine them inside. Warm, comfortable, a family unit complete without me. I didn't slow down. For the first time in years, I just kept driving. That night, I spread Clara's information across my kitchen table and really looked at the numbers. With careful planning, I could do this. I could actually do this. But doubt crept in with the darkness. What would people think? What would Daniel say when he found out? Would he be angry that I'd spent money on travel instead of keeping it available in case he needed it? More importantly, would he even care? I picked up my phone and scrolled to our text thread. The last message was from me, 3 weeks ago, asking how Marcus's science project had gone. Daniel had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Before that, I'd wished them luck on a camping trip. Another thumbs up. Months of one-sided conversations, reduced to emoji responses. I typed out a message. I'm thinking about taking a trip, something longer than usual. I wanted to let you know. I stared at it for 10 minutes before hitting send. Then I waited. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Sounds good, Mom. Have fun. That was it. No questions about where or when or why. No concern about me traveling alone. No interest in my life beyond a generic pleasantry. I set the phone down and looked at the brochures spread before me. Photos of the Acropolis glowing gold in sunset light. The Eiffel Tower sparkling against a night sky. Markets in Morocco overflowing with spices and colors. Temples in Japan wrapped in perfect silence. All these places existed without me. The world kept turning whether I participated in it or not. Daniel's life continued just fine without my presence. So why was I waiting for permission I would never receive? I called Clara the next morning. I want to do it. The full itinerary. 4 months. Lena! Her excitement was genuine, infectious. That's amazing. When do you want to leave? As soon as possible. The words came out firm, decided. Before I lose my nerve. Perfect. Let's plan for mid-January. That gives us time to handle logistics. Passport, visas, booking accommodations. Are you sure about this? I need to know you're committed before we start spending your money. Was I sure? No. I was terrified. I was 55 years old and had never traveled internationally alone. I didn't speak other languages. I didn't know how to navigate foreign airports or currency exchange or any of the 1,000 things that could go wrong. But I was also done waiting for my life to begin. I'm sure, I said. The next 2 weeks became a blur of preparation. I applied for my passport at the post office, standing in line with college students planning semester abroad programs and young couples booking honeymoons. The clerk processing my application was barely 20, calling me ma'am with every sentence, making me feel ancient and invisible. When she asked about my travel plans, I almost said something vague and apologetic. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said, I'm going around the world for 4 months. Her expression changed from bored professionalism to genuine interest. Wow, that's incredible. I wish my grandmother would do something like that. Your grandmother. The words stung, but I pushed past them. I was somebody's grandmother too, even if that somebody barely remembered I existed. I gave my notice at the library. My supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, looked surprised but pleased. Good for you, Lena. You've seemed so sad lately. Maybe this is exactly what you need. Had my sadness been that obvious? Had everyone seen it except me? I started selling furniture I didn't need, posting items on community sale sites. A young couple bought my dining room table, the one where I'd eaten alone for 2 years, the one with an extra leaf I kept in the closet for family dinners that never happened. This is perfect, the young woman said, running her hand over the wood. We just got married. This will be our first real table. I wanted to warn her. I wanted to tell her to protect her heart, to never give so much of herself that she disappeared. But instead, I smiled and wished them happiness and took their money. Each item I sold felt like shedding skin. The extra television I'd kept in the guest room for when Marcus visited. Gone. The china set I'd saved for special occasions that never materialized. Gone. The bookshelf full of photo albums Daniel had never asked to see. I kept a few pictures and donated the rest. My apartment began to look sparse, temporary, like a place someone was leaving rather than living, because I was leaving, actually leaving. On December 20th, exactly 1 week before Daniel's cruise departure, I invited him to lunch. He hesitated. He was busy, he said, so much to do before the trip. But something in my voice must have convinced him. We met at a diner halfway between our homes, the kind of anonymous restaurant where we'd never made memories, where there was nothing to remind us of who we used to be to each other. Daniel looked good, successful. His coat was expensive, his watch even more so. He looked like someone who had made it, who had everything figured out. He looked like a stranger. "So what's up, Mom?" He checked his phone even as he asked, his attention divided. "You said it was important? I wanted to tell you in person that I'm going away for a while." That got his attention. He looked up, actually focused on me for the first time. "Away? What do you mean? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I'm taking a trip. A long one. About 4 months." His eyebrows rose. 4 months? "Where are you going?" "Europe? Asia? South America. I'm doing a solo travel thing. Seeing the world." He stared at me like I'd announced I was joining the circus. "Mom, are you serious? That's a lot of time. And expensive. Do you really think that's wise?" There it was. The judgment. The implication that I wasn't capable of making my own decisions about my own life. "I've saved for years," I said calmly. "I can afford it. But what if there's an emergency? What if we need you?" The irony was stunning. "When was the last time you needed me, Daniel?" He blinked. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? When did you last invite me to dinner? When did Marcus last call me? When did you include me in anything that mattered?" His face hardened. "Mom, we've been over this. We're busy. We have our own lives." "I know. That's why I'm making mine." We sat in uncomfortable silence. The waitress brought food neither of us touched. "Is this because of the cruise?" he finally asked. "Because I said you couldn't come? Are you punishing us?" I almost laughed. Even now he made this about him. "No, Daniel. This is because I finally realized I don't need your permission to be happy. I never said you did. You didn't have to." He left shortly after, claiming he had errands to run, preparations to make. He paid for lunch, a guilty gesture probably, and told me to be safe on my trip. He didn't ask me to call when I arrived. He didn't ask for my itinerary. He didn't ask anything that might suggest he cared whether I came back. I sat in that diner alone for another hour, drinking cold coffee and feeling something shift inside my chest. Not breaking, shifting, like bones setting after a fracture, finding a new way to hold weight. When I finally left, I didn't cry. I drove home, looked at my nearly empty apartment, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. The day Daniel left for his cruise, I didn't watch their social media updates. I didn't torture myself imagining what I was missing. Instead, I finished packing for my own journey, laying out clothes and guidebooks, and the journal Clara had given me to document everything. On the cover, she'd written, "For Lena, who finally chose herself." I opened it to the first page and wrote the only words that mattered. "This is where my life begins." January 15th arrived with snow and uncertainty. I stood in my apartment, now mostly empty, furniture sold or donated, walls bare except for the pale rectangles where pictures had hung for decades, and felt the enormity of what I was about to do crash over me like a wave. My suitcase sat by the door. Just one. Clara had been firm about this. "You can only bring what you can carry yourself. This is about freedom, and freedom means traveling light." Traveling light. I'd spent 55 years accumulating things, possessions, obligations, relationships that weighed me down more than they lifted me up. Now everything I owned that mattered fit into one suitcase and a carry-on bag. My flight left in 6 hours. Athens first, then the Greek islands. Clara had mapped out a route that would take me through 12 countries over 4 months, each one carefully chosen to build my confidence gradually. "Start somewhere beautiful and relatively easy," she'd advised. "Let yourself fall in love with traveling before the challenging parts." I checked my phone one more time. No messages from Daniel. He'd been back from his cruise for 2 weeks, had posted dozens of photos of their amazing family adventure, but hadn't called to ask about my trip or wish me safe travels. Amanda's mother had commented on every single photo with heart emojis and exclamation points. I'd been tagged in exactly none of them. I shouldn't have looked. I knew better. But old habits died hard, and the habit of hoping I might suddenly matter to them was the hardest to kill. Sarah had offered to drive me to the airport. She arrived precisely on time, helping me load my luggage into her car with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. "Last chance to back out," she said as we pulled onto the highway, though her smile said she knew I wouldn't. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Good. That means you're doing something that matters." She glanced at me. "You know what you're running toward, right? Not just away from?" "I'm not sure I know the difference anymore." "You will. By the time you come back, you'll know exactly who you are without anyone else defining it for you." The airport was chaos. Families with screaming children, business travelers moving with purposeful efficiency, college students with backpacks that looked bigger than they were. I felt old among them, out of place, like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Sarah walked me as far as security would allow. When we hugged goodbye, she whispered in my ear, "Send me postcards. Real ones, not texts. Let me live vicariously through you." "Thank you," I said, and meant it more deeply than she could possibly know. "For everything. Thank you for being brave enough to do this. You're giving the rest of us permission to imagine it for ourselves." Then I was alone, standing in a security line that snaked through the terminal, watching families say goodbye to each other with tears and tight embraces. A grandmother about my age held her grandson like she might never see him again, whispering what looked like blessings into his hair. No one was here to see me off. No one except Sarah, who was already a fading memory in my rearview mirror. I'd never felt more alone or more free, and I couldn't tell which feeling was stronger. The flight to Athens was 11 hours of wrestling with doubt and excitement in equal measure. I sat between a businessman who worked on his laptop the entire time and a young couple who held hands and whispered to each other in Spanish, creating a small bubble of intimacy that made my loneliness feel more acute. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Tried to read, but the words blurred. Instead, I stared out the window at clouds that looked like mountains, at darkness that eventually gave way to sunrise somewhere over the Atlantic, and wondered what version of myself would return from this journey. Would I come back stronger? Wiser? Or would I discover that I was exactly who I'd always been, a woman whose worth was defined by how useful she was to others? Athens greeted me with chaos. The airport was a maze of signs in Greek and English, crowds moving in every direction, and the overwhelming smell of coffee and pastries and too many people in too small a space. I'd studied the instructions Clara had given me, how to get from the airport to my hotel, what to watch for, who to trust. But theory and practice were different things. My hands shook as I tried to buy a metro ticket from a machine that seemed designed to confuse tourists. A woman about my age, clearly local, noticed my struggle. She said something in Greek, then switched to accented English when I looked confused. "First time in Athens? First time anywhere, really," I admitted. She smiled and helped me purchase the ticket, explaining which line to take and where to transfer. "Welcome to Greece," she said warmly. "You picked a good time to visit. Not so many tourists now." That small kindness, from a stranger who owed me nothing, felt like a sign. Maybe the world was full of people willing to help if I was brave enough to accept assistance. The metro ride into the city was a blur of Greek conversations and glimpses of neighborhoods through dirty windows. I emerged near my hotel in the Plaka district, wheeling my suitcase over ancient cobblestones, feeling like an imposter in a place that had existed for thousands of years before I was born and would continue long after I was gone. My hotel was small, family-run, the kind of place Clara had recommended because it felt personal rather than corporate. The owner, a man named Dimitris, greeted me like he'd been expecting me specifically rather than just another guest. "Ah, Mrs. Morrison! Welcome, welcome! You have good timing. We just made fresh baklava. You must try some after you settle in." My room was tiny but charming, with a small balcony that overlooked the narrow street below. I could see the Acropolis in the distance, glowing in the afternoon light, real and impossible all at once. I unpacked mechanically, hanging clothes in the small closet, arranging toiletries in the bathroom, doing all the normal things that made a temporary space feel inhabited. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and realized I had absolutely no idea what to do next. I was in Athens, Greece, a place I'd dreamed about from my living room, a place that had existed only in books and other people's vacation photos. And now I was here, actually here, and I felt more lost than I had standing in my empty apartment. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Did you make it? Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm here, in Athens. I don't know what I'm doing." Her response came quickly. "Perfect. That's exactly where you should be. Now go outside and get lost." Literally. That's the only way to find yourself. I changed into comfortable shoes, grabbed my small day bag, and forced myself out the door before fear could change my mind. The streets of Plaka were narrow and winding, lined with shops selling tourist souvenirs and restaurants with tables spilling onto the sidewalks. I walked without direction, letting my feet make decisions my brain was too overwhelmed to handle. Other tourists moved around me with purpose. Couples consulting guidebooks, families following tour leaders, solo travelers who looked comfortable in their independence. I felt like a ghost among them, visible, but not quite present. I ended up at a small cafe tucked into a corner I nearly walked past. An elderly Greek woman sat outside, knitting something intricate and beautiful, occasionally looking up to watch people pass. Something about her reminded me of my own mother, the same weathered hands, the same expression of someone who'd seen enough of life to stop being surprised by it. I sat at a nearby table and ordered coffee, pointing at the menu because I couldn't pronounce anything correctly. The waiter brought me something strong and sweet, served in a tiny cup with a glass of water. The elderly woman glanced over. "You are alone?" "Yes." "By choice or by circumstance?" The question was more profound than she probably intended. "Both, I think." She nodded sagely, her needles continuing their rhythmic clicking. "The alone by choice is freedom. The alone by circumstance is just alone. You must decide which you are experiencing." I sipped my coffee and let her words settle into me. Was this freedom? Or was I just running away from rejection, putting geographical distance between myself and the pain of being forgotten? "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Then you are already wiser than most tourists who come here thinking they have answers." She gestured toward the Acropolis visible in the distance. "That place has stood for thousands of years. The people who built it are dust. Their children are dust. Their children's children are dust. But the stones remain. You know what this teaches us?" I shook my head. "That what we build matters less than how we live. The stones are impressive, but they are just stones. The living, the being here, now in this moment. This is the real monument." I'm not sure why that made me cry, but suddenly tears were streaming down my face, hot and embarrassing in this public place. The old woman didn't seem bothered. She just continued knitting while I fell apart at the table next to her. When I finally composed myself, I whispered, "I'm sorry." "For what? For feeling? For being human?" She shook her head. "American women, always apologizing for existing. Here in Greece, we cry when we need to cry. We laugh when we need to laugh. We live. I'm not sure I remember how. Then you learn again, like a baby. First, you crawl. You are crawling now, coming to new place, being afraid, not knowing what comes next. This is good. Soon you will walk, then run, then fly." She smiled, showing gaps where teeth used to be. "But first, you must forgive yourself for taking so long to start crawling." I stayed at that cafe for 2 hours, watching the light change as afternoon turned to evening, watching people come and go with their normal lives and their normal problems. The old woman eventually packed up her knitting and left, touching my shoulder briefly as she passed, a gesture of blessing or solidarity or simple human recognition. I walked back to my hotel as the sun set, painting the city in shades of gold and pink. Tomorrow, Clara's itinerary said, I should visit the Acropolis and the ancient Agora. I should check off tourist sites and take photos to prove I'd been there. But tonight, I just wanted to sit on my small balcony and feel what it was like to be somewhere Daniel couldn't define me, somewhere Amanda's mother's comments couldn't reach, somewhere Marcus didn't know existed. I pulled out my phone and opened Daniel's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button. Old habits, old hope, old patterns dying hard. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, Day 1. I cried in front of a stranger. She didn't look away. Maybe that's what kindness looks like. Not fixing someone's pain, but sitting with them while they feel it. Then I turned off my phone completely and watched the city lights come on one by one, each window a small beacon in the darkness, each one holding stories I would never know, lives I would never touch. But I was here, finally, incredibly, impossibly here. And for tonight, that was enough. The first week in Athens passed in a blur of sensory overload and small victories that felt monumental. I learned to navigate the metro system without asking for help. I ordered meals in restaurants by pointing and smiling, slowly picking up Greek words that made locals' faces light up with approval. I walked until my feet ached, climbing hills to viewpoints where the entire city spread below me like a map come to life. But the loneliness was crushing. Every beautiful thing I saw I wanted to share. Every interesting meal, every stunning sunset, every moment of wonder. They all felt incomplete without someone to turn to and say, "Did you see that?" I took photos with my phone, dozens of them, hundreds. Pictures of ancient columns against blue sky, of narrow streets lined with bougainvillea, of cats sleeping in sunny doorways. I'd open my text messages to send them to Daniel, my finger hovering over his name, before remembering that he didn't want these moments. He'd chosen his own moments, his own family, his own life that didn't include me. So I started sending them to Sarah instead. Long messages about what I was seeing, how I was feeling, the small adventures that made up my days. She responded with enthusiasm that felt genuine, living vicariously through my experiences the way she'd asked to. On my 8th day in Athens, I met Priya. I'd gone to a small restaurant Dimitris had recommended, one that didn't cater to tourists, where the menu was only in Greek and the owner's mother cooked in a kitchen you could see from the dining room. I was struggling to communicate what I wanted when a voice from the next table called out in English, "Try the moussaka. It's incredible here." I turned to see a woman about my age, maybe slightly younger, with dark skin and laugh lines around her eyes that suggested a life well lived. She was eating alone, a book propped open beside her plate. "Thank you," I said gratefully. "First time in Greece? Is it that obvious?" She laughed, warm and genuine. "Only because you have that look, like everything is both overwhelming and magical at the same time. I remember that feeling." She gestured to the empty chair at her table. "Would you like to join me? Solo travel is wonderful, but sometimes it's nice to share a meal with another human being." I hesitated for only a moment before accepting. Her name was Priya, and she was from London, traveling for 6 months after taking early retirement from a career in medicine. "I spent 30 years caring for other people," she explained. "I woke up one morning and realized I'd never taken care of myself. So here I am." "How long have you been traveling?" I asked. 3 months so far. Started in Spain, worked my way east. Greece is my 4th country." She took a sip of wine. "And you? What brings you to Athens alone?" I told her the truth, or a version of it, about Daniel and the cruise and finally deciding to choose myself. I didn't cry this time, which felt like progress. Priya listened with the kind of attention that made me feel truly heard, not just waited out while someone planned their own response. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. "Good for you," she said simply. "It takes courage to walk away from waiting." I'm not sure it's courage. Maybe it's just desperation. Those two things look very similar from the outside. The difference is what happens next. She smiled. "So what happens next for you? Where do you go after Athens?" I told her about Clara's itinerary, the Greek islands, then Italy, then working my way through Europe before heading to Asia. As I described it, I felt that flutter of excitement pushing through the anxiety, the same feeling I'd had in Clara's office when the world suddenly seemed full of possibility. "I'm heading to Santorini next week," Priya said. "If you're going to the islands, you should join me. It's more fun to explore with someone else, and you seem like good company." The offer surprised me. We'd known each other for less than an hour, but there was something easy about her presence, something that didn't require me to perform or pretend or protect anyone's feelings. "I'd like that," I said. We exchanged contact information and made plans to meet in Santorini in 5 days. After dinner, walking back to my hotel through streets now familiar, I felt something shift in my chest. For the first time since leaving home, the loneliness felt less heavy. Maybe I didn't need Daniel's family. Maybe I could build my own. One meal at a time, one conversation at a time, with people who chose to include me rather than people who felt obligated by biology. Santorini was everything the pictures promised and more. White buildings cascading down cliffs toward water so blue it hurt to look at directly. Narrow streets where you could get gloriously lost without consequence. Sunsets that made you believe in magic. Priya and I rented a small apartment together, splitting the cost and the space with the comfortable ease of people who both valued their independence but also appreciated companionship. She was funny and sharp and had no patience for self-pity, including her own. I spent 2 years being angry at my ex-husband, she told me one evening as we sat on our balcony watching the sun sink toward the horizon. 2 years giving him power over my emotional state, letting his choices dictate my happiness. You know what changed? What? I realized he wasn't thinking about me at all. I was giving him all this mental space, and he'd moved on completely. I was holding on to pain he'd already forgotten about. She refilled our wine glasses. Your son isn't sitting in his house feeling guilty about excluding you. He's living his life. The question is, when do you start living yours? The words should have hurt, but instead they felt clarifying. She was right. Daniel wasn't agonizing over my absence. He probably barely noticed it. How do you stop caring? I asked. How do you turn off the part that keeps hoping things will change? You don't turn it off. You redirect it. You care about yourself instead. You hope for your own happiness instead of waiting for someone else to provide it. She looked at me. What do you want, Lena? Not what you want Daniel to do or say. What do you want for yourself? No one had asked me that in years, maybe decades. I'd spent so long defining my wants through other people's needs that I'd forgotten I was allowed to have desires that existed independent of anyone else. I want to feel like I matter, I said finally. Like my existence makes a difference to someone. You matter to me, Priya said simply. You matter to Sarah, from what you've told me about her. You matter to that hotel owner who keeps giving you extra baklava because he thinks you're too thin. You matter to yourself, or you should. She paused. The people who can't see your worth? That's their failing, not yours. We stayed in Santorini for 2 weeks, longer than either of us had originally planned. We explored villages perched on cliff edges, swam in volcanic hot springs, ate at tiny restaurants where the owner's grandmother insisted on feeding us extra portions. We took hundreds of photos, of the places we saw, but also of each other, documenting this unexpected friendship that had formed in a foreign country between 2 women who'd both finally chosen themselves. One afternoon, Priya convinced me to try something I'd resisted, posting my photos online, not on the social media where Daniel and Amanda would see them, but on a travel blog she helped me set up. Share your story, she urged. Not for them, for you. And for all the other women who need to see that it's never too late to start living. I titled it simply, Lena's Journey. The first post included photos from Athens and Santorini, along with words that felt both terrifying and liberating to write publicly. I'm 55 years old, traveling alone for the first time in my life. I spent decades being someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's convenient option when nothing better was available. 3 weeks ago, I decided to be my own first choice. These are the places I'm seeing. This is what choosing yourself looks like. I hit publish before I could second-guess it, then immediately wanted to delete it. What if people thought I was pathetic? What if Daniel saw it somehow and got angry? What if— Stop spiraling, Priya said, watching my face. You just did something brave. Let yourself feel proud instead of afraid. The next morning, I woke to find the post had been shared dozens of times. Comments poured in from strangers around the world, women my age and older, telling me their own stories of being overlooked and undervalued, thanking me for having the courage to leave, asking for advice about how to start their own journeys. You're inspiring people, Priya said, reading over my shoulder. Look at this. A woman in Australia says she's been sitting on plane tickets for 6 months, too afraid to go alone. You just gave her the push she needed. I read through the comments with tears in my eyes, but these were different tears than I'd cried before. These weren't tears of pain or rejection. These were tears of recognition, the realization that my story mattered to people I'd never met, that my experience had value beyond what Daniel deemed worth acknowledging. One comment in particular struck me, from a woman named Margaret who wrote, "I'm 68 and spent the last 5 years caring for my husband through his final illness. He passed away 6 months ago, and my children keep telling me I should be grateful for the time I had with him and move on quietly. But I'm not ready to be quiet. Thank you for showing me that starting over isn't selfish. It's survival." I responded to her directly. "Margaret, it's never too late to choose yourself. If a 55-year-old who's never traveled alone can do this, so can you. The world is still here, waiting for us to show up." That night, Priya and I celebrated with an expensive dinner at a restaurant carved into the cliffside, where we could watch the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossible. Pinks and oranges and purples that melted into each other like watercolors bleeding together. "To new beginnings," Priya toasted. "To finally believing we deserve them," I added. We clinked glasses, and I felt something settle into place inside me. Not happiness exactly. That felt too simple, too complete. But contentment. The sense that I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I should be doing, regardless of whether anyone back home approved or even noticed. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom, someone from my office showed me some blog post going around. Is that you? Are you seriously posting about our family online?" My stomach clenched. There it was. The guilt, the immediate instinct to apologize, to delete everything, to make myself small again so he could be comfortable. But then I looked at Priya, at the sunset, at the world that had opened up to me when I finally stopped waiting for permission. I typed back, "Yes, it's me. I'm in Greece, living my life. I hope you're enjoying yours." Then I turned off my phone and ordered dessert. "Everything okay?" Priya asked. "Everything's different," I said, which is exactly what I needed. From Santorini, we traveled to Crete, then to several smaller islands whose names I struggled to pronounce but whose beauty I'll never forget. Each place offered something new: a hidden beach, a monastery built into a mountainside, a festival where locals pulled us into dancing we didn't know but somehow learned by doing. And everywhere we went, I wrote blog posts about the places I saw, but more importantly, about what I was discovering about myself, about the strength it took to eat alone in restaurants, about the joy of getting lost and finding unexpected treasures, about the profound relief of existing in spaces where no one knew me as Daniel's mother or Thomas's widow, where I could just be Lena, a woman having her own adventure. The blog grew. Hundreds of followers became thousands. Women wrote to tell me they'd been inspired to book their own trips, to leave bad relationships, to stop waiting for life to begin and actually start living. Some shared photos of themselves in places they'd never thought they'd go, holding up signs that said, "Choosing myself," or "Lena inspired me." I was becoming part of something larger than my own small story. A movement of women who were done being invisible, done being the supporting characters in other people's narratives. But the most surprising response came from someone unexpected. 6 weeks into my journey, as Priya and I prepared to part ways, she was heading to Turkey, I was continuing to Italy, I received an email through my blog's contact form. The sender's name was Marcus Morrison, my grandson, my 12-year-old grandson who barely knew I existed. The subject line read, "Grandma?" With shaking hands, I opened it. "Hi, Grandma Lena. I hope this is really you and not some fake account. My friend's mom showed me your blog. She said you're inspiring people. I didn't even know you were gone until Dad mentioned it. He seemed kind of mad about your blog, but I read all your posts and looked at all your pictures. You look really happy. I never really saw you look happy before. I'm sorry about that. I know I haven't been a good grandson. I'd like to do better. Maybe when you come home we could talk? If you want to. I understand if you don't. But I wanted you to know that I see you now. Marcus." I read it 3 times, then showed it to Priya through tears I couldn't control. "That," she said softly, "is what happens when you stop making yourself small. People finally have room to see you." I responded simply, "Marcus, I'm in Italy next, then Japan, then South America. I'll be home in 2 months. Let's talk then. I'd like that very much. Love, Grandma Lena." For the first time since starting this journey, I looked forward to going home, not because I needed them anymore, but because maybe, finally, someone needed to know me. Italy welcomed me with rain and the smell of fresh bread from bakeries that had been operating for centuries. Rome first, where every street corner held layers of history I could barely comprehend. Ancient ruins nestled between modern cafes, fountains older than my country, art that made me stand speechless in museums until my feet ached and my eyes burned from trying to take it all in. I was alone again. Priya and I had parted with promises to meet up again, perhaps in Southeast Asia if our schedules aligned. We'd hugged tightly at the ferry terminal, two women who'd found friendship in the least likely circumstances, who'd given each other permission to exist fully. "Don't go backwards," she'd whispered in my ear. "No matter what happens when you go home, don't forget who you became out here." I promised I wouldn't, though part of me wondered if that was a promise I could keep. The blog continued to grow in ways I couldn't have imagined. What had started as a simple way to document my journey had become something larger, a community of women sharing their own stories, offering advice and encouragement to each other, creating a support network that transcended geography and circumstance. I posted almost daily now, photos of the Colosseum at sunset, of tiny trattorias where I ate pasta that made me understand why Italians were passionate about food, of myself standing in front of the Trevi fountain having thrown in a coin for a wish I no longer needed anyone else to grant. The comments section had become its own ecosystem, women planning their own escapes, celebrating small victories, mourning setbacks, lifting each other up in ways that made me wish I'd found this community years earlier. One woman, Helen from Toronto, wrote, "My daughter told me I was too old to travel alone. I'm 62. Lena, you've shown me that too old is just another way of saying too scared. I booked tickets to Scotland yesterday. I leave next month. Thank you for saving my life." Another, Rosa from Mexico, shared, "I've been saving money secretly for 3 years. My husband thinks I'm content staying home while he goes on fishing trips with his friends. Next week, I'm telling him I'm going to visit my sister. Instead, I'm going to Paris. Alone. For the first time in 35 years of marriage, I'm choosing me." These stories broke my heart and rebuilt it at the same time. How many of us had been invisible for so long? How many had learned to make ourselves small to accommodate other people's comfort? In Florence, I met a couple from Australia who recognized me from my blog. They were in their 70s, traveling for 6 months to celebrate their 50th anniversary, and the wife grabbed my hands like we were old friends. "You're Lena!" she exclaimed. "I've been following your journey since Athens. You inspired my niece to leave an abusive marriage. She said if you could find courage at 55, she could find it at 32. I didn't know what to say to that. The idea that my pain, my choice to finally value myself, could ripple out and change other lives felt overwhelming in the best possible way. Your blog helped me too," the husband added quietly. "Made me realize I'd been taking my wife for granted, assuming she'd always be there no matter how little effort I put in. Reading your story was a wake-up call. I'm trying to do better." After they left, I sat in a cafe and cried into my cappuccino, not from sadness, but from the strange alchemy of discovering that the worst thing that had ever happened to me, Daniel's rejection, had somehow transformed into the catalyst for helping others. Marcus and I had begun exchanging emails, short ones at first, tentative on both sides, like two people learning a language neither of us spoke fluently. He told me about school, about his friends, about a science project on renewable energy that he was passionate about. He asked about my travels with genuine curiosity. What was my favorite place so far? What was the best food I'd eaten? What had surprised me most about traveling alone? I answered honestly, sending him photos that weren't on my blog, sharing stories I hadn't posted publicly. Slowly, carefully, we were building something that resembled a relationship. He didn't mention his parents, and I didn't ask. This was between us, grandmother and grandson, two people trying to know each other for the first time despite 12 years of existing in proximity. One email from him stood out, arriving late one night while I was in Venice, sitting on a small bridge watching gondolas glide past in the darkness. "Grandma, can I ask you something? Were you always unhappy? I've been thinking about all the times I saw you, and I don't remember you smiling much. Not real smiling. Dad says you're having some kind of crisis and that's why you left so suddenly. But your blog doesn't read like someone in crisis. It reads like someone who finally woke up. Was I part of why you left? Did I make you feel bad? The question gutted me. This child, barely old enough to understand the complexities of adult relationships, somehow seeing what his father refused to acknowledge, that I had been unhappy, that I had been invisible, that my leaving wasn't a crisis but a survival. I wrote back immediately. Marcus, you were never the problem. You were a child, and children aren't responsible for the emotional well-being of adults. The problem was that I forgot I mattered. I forgot that I deserved to take up space, to have adventures, to be seen. Your dad forgot too, and I let him forget because I didn't believe I was worth remembering. But none of that is your fault. You were just being a kid, living your life, which is exactly what you should have been doing. I left because I finally realized I had a life too, and I'd been waiting too long to start living it. His response came the next morning. I want to know you, the real you, not just the grandma who used to stand on the sidelines at my baseball games looking sad. When you come home, can we start over? Can I have a second chance? I read that email a dozen times, each reading bringing fresh tears. A second chance. This child was offering me what his father had never considered. The opportunity to be seen, to be known, to matter. Yes, I wrote back. We can absolutely start over. Japan changed something fundamental in me. The quiet reverence of temples, the precision of tea ceremonies, the way strangers bowed to each other with genuine respect. It all felt like a masterclass in dignity and self-worth. I stayed in Kyoto for 3 weeks, longer than I'd planned, renting a small room in a guest house run by a woman named Yuki who spoke limited English but communicated volumes through kindness. She taught me to make proper miso soup, to appreciate the ceremony of sharing a meal, to find peace in repetitive tasks done with attention and care. You are running from something, she observed one morning as we prepared breakfast together. It wasn't a question. I was, I corrected. Now I think I'm running toward something. I'm just not sure what yet. She nodded thoughtfully. In Japan, we have concept, kintsugi. When pottery breaks, we repair it with gold. The cracks become part of the beauty, not something to hide. She looked at me directly. You are like kintsugi. The breaking made you more beautiful, not less. I thought about that constantly over the following weeks. The breaking made you more beautiful. Daniel's rejection hadn't diminished me. It had cracked me open, and I was filling those cracks with gold I'd gathered from every place I visited, every person I met, every moment I chose myself. The blog post I wrote about kintsugi went viral. Within 48 hours, it had been shared over 10,000 times. Women from around the world commented with their own stories of being broken and rebuilt, of finding beauty in their scars, of learning that survival itself was a form of art. One comment, from a woman named Patricia in Ireland, struck particularly deep. I'm 71 years old. My husband died last year, and my children immediately started dividing up my possessions, like I was already dead too. They've been trying to convince me to sell my home and move into a care facility because they think I can't manage alone. I've been believing them, but reading your blog, seeing you thrive at 55, traveling the world, inspiring thousands, I realize they're wrong. I'm not done. I'm not ready to disappear. Tomorrow, I'm telling them I'm keeping my house and my independence. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to choose yourself. I responded, Patricia, you were never done. You were just waiting for permission. Consider this your permission slip. Signed, sealed, and delivered with love from a woman who waited too long for hers. The messages kept coming. Women in their 60s, 70s, even their 80s, telling me they'd been inspired to travel, to leave bad situations, to stop accepting crumbs from people who should have been offering banquets. My follower count had grown to over 50,000. Somehow, without intending to, I'd become a voice for women who'd spent lifetimes being voiceless. The requests for interviews started arriving. Local news stations, women's magazines, online platforms. Everyone wanted to talk to the 55-year-old woman who'd walked away from being invisible and found herself halfway around the world. I accepted a few, carefully chosen ones. A podcast focused on women's empowerment. An online magazine article about solo travel for mature women. A video interview where I sat in a cherry blossom garden in Kyoto and talked about what it meant to finally choose yourself after decades of choosing everyone else. In each interview, I was honest about the pain, about feeling discarded by my son, about the loneliness of being forgotten by the people who should have remembered, about the terror of starting over when you felt too old, too tired, too broken to begin again. But I was also honest about the joy, the unexpected friendships, the sunrises that made me believe in magic, the growing sense that I wasn't just surviving, I was actually living, perhaps for the first time in my entire life. One interviewer asked the question everyone seemed to want answered. Do you regret not doing this sooner? I thought carefully before responding. Regret implies I had the power to choose differently, and I'm not sure that's true. I had to become this broken before I could become this brave. The woman I was 5 years ago couldn't have done this. She still believed her worth was determined by other people's valuation. It took hitting rock bottom, being explicitly told I wasn't family enough to matter, for me to finally understand that the only person who needed to value me was me. The interviewer, a woman in her 40s who'd mentioned her own complicated relationship with her mother, had tears in her eyes. What would you say to women who are where you were, feeling invisible, waiting to be chosen? Stop waiting, I said simply. Choose yourself, book the ticket, leave the situation, take the risk. Yes, it's terrifying. Yes, you might fail. Yes, people might judge you or tell you you're being selfish or irresponsible. But I promise you, the regret of staying invisible is so much worse than the fear of being seen. And you deserve to be seen. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to matter, not to anyone else, but to yourself. That video clip was shared millions of times. Someone set it to music and it became a trending sound on social media. Women filmed themselves booking plane tickets, leaving toxic relationships, starting businesses they'd dreamed about for years, all using the hashtag #ChooseYourself. Daniel finally called. Not texted, actually called. I was in a small cafe in Osaka when my phone rang with his name on the screen. For a moment, I considered not answering, but something in me wanted to hear what he had to say, now that I was no longer waiting desperately for his approval. Mom. His voice was strained, controlled. We need to talk about this situation. Hello, Daniel. I'm well, thank you for asking. Japan is beautiful. How are you? A pause. Mom, you've become some kind of internet sensation, and you're talking about our family publicly. You're embarrassing us. The old me would have apologized immediately, would have deleted everything, would have made myself small again to ease his discomfort. The new me, the woman who'd learned she was kintsugi, took a breath and said calmly, I'm not talking about your family, Daniel. I'm talking about my experience, my pain, my journey. You're welcome to have your own feelings about it, but you don't get to police how I process mine. You made me look like a bad son. I told the truth about my experience. If that makes you look like a bad son, perhaps that's something to examine in yourself, rather than something to blame me for. His silence was heavy, angry. Amanda thinks you're having a breakdown, that you need help. What do you think? Another pause. I think you're acting irrationally. Spending all your savings, broadcasting private family business, running around the world like a teenager instead of acting your age. And what is acting my age, Daniel? Sitting in my apartment waiting for phone calls that never come? Being grateful for whatever scraps of attention you decide to throw my way? Accepting that my only value is as background decoration in your life? That's not fair, isn't it? My voice was steady, calm. Tell me, when was the last time you invited me to dinner and actually meant it? When did you last ask about my life, my thoughts, my dreams? When did you last treat me like I was a person who mattered and not just an obligation you tolerated? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. I didn't realize you felt that way, he finally said, and his voice was smaller now, less certain. I know you didn't. That's part of the problem. You stopped seeing me so completely that you didn't notice when I disappeared. So this whole thing, the travel, the blog, all of it, this is what? Punishment? No, Daniel. This is survival. This is me remembering I'm allowed to exist even when you forget I'm alive. I heard him take a shaky breath. Marcus has been asking about you. He wants to see you when you get back. I know, we've been emailing. You have. He sounded surprised, almost hurt. He didn't tell me that. Maybe he needed something that was just his. I understand that feeling. Another long silence. Then, when are you coming home? 6 weeks. I'll be home in 6 weeks. And then what? And then I continue living my life. You're welcome to be part of it, Daniel, but you're no longer the center of it. That position is filled by me. After we hung up, I sat in that cafe for an hour, shaking, crying, feeling everything at once. I'd done it. I'd stood up to him. I'd told the truth without apologizing for it. And I'd survived. More than survived. I'd meant every word. The journey was almost over. Just South America left, then home. But I was bringing home a different woman than the one who'd left. One who knew her worth. One who'd filled her cracks with gold. One who'd finally learned that choosing yourself wasn't selfish. It was the bravest thing you could do. Peru was my final destination before heading home, and it felt fitting somehow. A place where ancient civilizations had built impossible cities on mountaintops, where people had thrived in conditions that should have defeated them, where beauty emerged from hardship. I'd signed up for a group trek to Machu Picchu, something the old Lena would never have considered. The idea of hiking for 4 days with strangers, sleeping in tents, being physically uncomfortable and vulnerable, it all would have seemed impossible just months ago. But I'd learned something on this journey. Impossible was just another word for things I hadn't tried yet. Our group was small, 8 people ranging from their 20s to their 60s. I was the oldest, and on the first day of hiking, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. My legs ached after the first hour. My lungs burned from the altitude. I fell behind the group repeatedly, watching younger, fitter people stride ahead while I struggled to put one foot in front of the other. Our guide, a Peruvian man named Carlos, stayed back with me during one particularly difficult stretch. "You are thinking you should not have come," he observed. "I'm slowing everyone down. You are going at your pace. This is not a race." He gestured to the mountains surrounding us. "These peaks have stood for millions of years. They do not care how fast you climb them. They care only that you show up. I'm not sure I can do this," I admitted. "You have already done it. You are here. You are climbing. The doing is already happening." He smiled. "The question is not can you, but will you let yourself believe you can?" I thought about that as I continued climbing. How much of my life had I spent believing I couldn't do things simply because I'd never done them before? How many opportunities had I missed because I'd decided in advance that I wasn't capable, wasn't strong enough, wasn't worthy enough? By the 3rd day, something shifted. My body adjusted to the altitude, found its rhythm. I stopped comparing my pace to others and focused on the mountain itself, the way morning light painted the peaks gold, the sound of wind through valleys, the small flowers that somehow grew in rocky soil where nothing should survive. On the morning of the 4th day, we reached Machu Picchu just as the sun rose over the mountains. The ruins emerged from morning mist like something out of a dream, ancient stones perfectly fitted together by people who'd understood something about permanence and beauty that we'd forgotten. I stood at the edge of the citadel and wept. Not from exhaustion, though I was bone-tired. Not even from the overwhelming beauty of the place, though it was staggering. I cried because I'd done it. I'd climbed a mountain at 55 years old. I'd proven to myself that my body was capable of more than I'd believed, that my spirit was stronger than the voice that kept insisting I was too old, too weak, too broken. A young woman from our group, maybe 25, came and stood beside me. "This is my 3rd time here," she said quietly. "But watching you climb this mountain, that's more inspiring than the ruins. My grandmother is your age. She never leaves her house. She says her life is over, that adventure is for young people. I'm going to show her your blog when I get home. Show her that it's never too late. Tell her something for me," I said. "Tell her that every day she decides her life is over, she's right. And every day she decides it's not, she's also right. She gets to choose which truth she lives by." We took photos. Group shots where I stood in the center instead of hovering at the edges like I used to, trying to minimize my presence. Individual shots where I spread my arms wide, claiming space, celebrating that I was here, alive, present in this impossible, beautiful moment. That evening, back at our hostel in Cusco, I wrote what I knew would be my final blog post before returning home. 4 months ago, I was invisible. Not to the world. I showed up to work. I existed in physical space. But to the people who should have seen me most clearly. My son told me I wasn't family enough to join their cruise. And in that moment, I had a choice. Believe him or believe in myself. I chose myself. This blog has been about my journey around the world, but more than that, it's been about the journey back to myself, to the woman I was before I learned to disappear, to the woman I'm becoming now that I've remembered I'm allowed to take up space. I've hiked mountains and crossed oceans. I've eaten food I couldn't pronounce and slept in places that terrified me. I've gotten lost in cities where I didn't speak the language, and found my way by trusting strangers who had no reason to help me, except that they were kind. But the most important journey wasn't measured in miles or countries visited. It was measured in moments when I chose my own happiness over someone else's comfort. When I stopped apologizing for existing. When I finally understood that my worth wasn't determined by whether people chose to see it. To everyone who's followed along, who's shared your stories, who's been brave enough to choose yourself because you saw me do it first. Thank you. You've taught me that pain shared becomes lighter, that courage is contagious, that we're all just looking for permission to matter. Consider this your permission slip. You don't need anyone else to sign it. You never did. I'm going home tomorrow. Not because I've run out of world to see, but because I've found what I was looking for. Not in Greece or Italy or Japan or Peru, but in myself. In the quiet knowledge that I'm enough, that I've always been enough, that anyone who couldn't see that was looking in the wrong direction. Home will be different now. I'm different now. And that's exactly as it should be. With love and gratitude. Lena. The post went viral within hours. Comments poured in, thousands of them, from women and men around the world who'd been following my journey, who'd been changed by watching me change. But the comment that mattered most came from an unexpected source, posted publicly, where everyone could see it, from an account I recognized immediately. Grandma Lena, this is Marcus. I know I've been emailing you privately, but I wanted to say this where everyone could see it. You're the bravest person I know. I'm proud to be your grandson. I can't wait to see you when you get home. I love you. I read it through tears, then read the replies. Hundreds of people telling Marcus what a wonderful grandson he was, how lucky I was to have him, how beautiful it was to see family reconnecting. But there was another comment, posted just minutes after Marcus's, from an account I didn't recognize but knew instantly from the carefully worded, slightly stiff tone. Mom, it's Daniel. I don't really know how to use this blog thing, but Marcus showed me how to comment. I've read all of your posts. All of them. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not seeing you. I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't matter. I'm sorry for taking so long to realize what I was losing by not paying attention. You were right about everything you said on the phone. I was treating you like an obligation instead of my mother, like a background character instead of a person. I don't know if I can undo the damage I've done, but I want to try. If you'll let me. Amanda and I have been talking. We've been looking at our behavior, at how we've treated you, and we're ashamed. We'd like to start over. If you're willing to give us that chance. I understand if you're not. I stared at that comment for a long time, my heart doing complicated things in my chest. Part of me wanted to protect myself, to maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. Part of me was angry that it had taken my absence and public blog for him to finally see what had been in front of him all along. But there was another part, smaller, more tentative, that recognized something genuine in his words, the absence of excuses, the acknowledgement of harm, the willingness to be vulnerable publicly, to admit fault where thousands could witness it. I thought about kintsugi, about broken things made more beautiful by repair, about second chances and whether grace was something you extended because people deserved it or because you did. I responded publicly, Daniel, I'm willing to try, but things will be different. I'm different. I won't make myself small anymore to make you comfortable. I won't wait by the phone hoping you'll remember I exist. I won't accept crumbs and pretend they're a feast. If we rebuild this relationship, it will be as equals, as two adults who choose each other every day, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. If you can accept that, then yes. Let's start over. The comment section exploded with reactions. Some people thought I was too forgiving, that Daniel didn't deserve another chance. Others celebrated the possibility of reconciliation. Many shared their own stories of fractured family relationships and the complicated mathematics of forgiveness. But what mattered most to me wasn't what strangers on the internet thought. It was that I'd stated my terms clearly. I'd chosen myself first, relationships second, and if Daniel wanted to be part of my life, it would be on terms that honored my worth, not diminished it. The flight home was long, Lima to Miami to my home city, over 20 hours of travel that gave me plenty of time to think about what came next. I was returning to the same apartment, the same town, the same life I'd left behind, except none of it was the same, because I wasn't the same. I'd sold most of my furniture before leaving, and I hadn't replaced it. The apartment I was returning to would be sparse, empty of things but full of possibility. I could redecorate. I could move somewhere entirely new. I could do whatever I wanted because for the first time in my life, I understood that my choices didn't require anyone else's approval. Sarah picked me up from the airport, squealing and hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Look at you," she said, holding me at arm's length. "You're glowing. You look 10 years younger, 20 years younger." "I feel like I've lived 20 more years," I said. "But good years. Full years." We drove through streets that were familiar, but somehow foreign, like returning to a childhood home and finding everything smaller than you remembered. Had it always looked this ordinary? Had I really spent decades here without seeing how much world existed beyond these same routes? Same landmarks? Same small circle of experience? "Marcus has been beside himself waiting for you," Sarah said. "He's been in the library every Tuesday asking when you're coming back. That boy adores you. We barely knew each other before I left. Maybe that's why. You gave him the chance to choose to know you instead of just assuming he would because you're related. That's a gift. Choice instead of obligation." My apartment felt strange, empty and echoey, like a stage set waiting for actors to arrive and give it purpose. But it didn't feel sad. It felt open, ready, like a blank page waiting for a new story to be written. I unpacked slowly, hanging clothes that smelled like foreign laundries and different climates. I lined up small treasures I'd collected: a painted tile from Portugal, a wooden elephant from Thailand, a smooth stone from a Peruvian mountain that had tested my strength and proved I was stronger than I believed. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I had saved as Marcus. "Grandma, are you home? Can I come see you? Please? Dad says I should wait, but I've been waiting for weeks and I really want to see you." I smiled and typed back, "Come now, I'll make tea. We have a lot of catching up to do." 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Marcus standing there, taller than I remembered, holding a small plant in a pot wrapped in tissue paper. "Hi, Grandma Lena," he said, suddenly shy. "I brought you this. It's a succulent. They're really hard to kill. I thought maybe it could be like a new start for both of us." I took the plant and pulled him into a hug. He was stiff at first, unused to physical affection from me, but then he relaxed and hugged me back, fierce and tight. "Thank you," I whispered. "It's perfect." We sat in my nearly empty living room, drinking tea and eating cookies I'd picked up at the airport. Marcus asked about my travels. What was the scariest thing I did? The best food I ate? The most beautiful place I saw? He listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, engaging with my stories in a way he never had before. Then, during a comfortable pause, he said quietly, "I'm sorry, Grandma, for not seeing you before, for not trying to know you. Marcus, you were a child. I'm 12. I'm old enough to know when I'm hurting someone. I'm old enough to make better choices." He looked at me with eyes that were suddenly older than his years. "Dad told me what he said to you, about the cruise, about you not being family. I told him that was the meanest thing I'd ever heard anyone say. Mom cried when I said it. I think she knew it was wrong too, but didn't want to admit it. Your dad and I are going to try to fix things," I said carefully. "But that's between him and me. You and I, we're building our own relationship, one that doesn't depend on anyone else." "I'd like that," he hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. In your blog, you talked about choosing yourself. How did you know it was the right choice? What if you'd been wrong?" I thought about how to answer that. I couldn't have been wrong, Marcus. because the alternative was continuing to disappear until there was nothing left of me. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself, even when everyone else thinks you should keep drowning quietly. He nodded slowly. I want to be brave like you when I grow up. You already are. You chose to reach out to me. You chose to build this bridge. That took courage. We talked for 2 more hours, until his phone rang with a call from Daniel asking when he'd be home. As Marcus gathered his things to leave, he turned back at the door. Grandma, will you come to my baseball game next Saturday? Not because you have to, but because you want to. I want to, I said. I absolutely want to. After he left, I sat in my empty apartment and felt it fill with possibility. The journey wasn't over. It was just changing shape, moving from external adventure to internal exploration. I'd learned to choose myself halfway around the world. Now I would learn to keep choosing myself right here at home. And that, I was beginning to understand, was the real journey all along. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that makes you believe in new beginnings. I dressed carefully for Marcus's baseball game, not trying too hard, not trying too little, just comfortable in my own skin in a way I'd never been before. The baseball field was exactly as I remembered it, but my relationship to it had changed completely. I wasn't arriving early to claim a seat in the corner where I could watch without being noticed. I wasn't preparing myself to be ignored by Amanda or to receive a cursory nod from Daniel before they found seats on the opposite side of the bleachers. I was here because my grandson had invited me, because I wanted to be here, because I finally understood that my presence was a gift I chose to give, not a desperate plea for acceptance. I saw them before they saw me, Daniel, Amanda, and Marcus warming up on the field. Daniel looked nervous, scanning the crowd, and when his eyes landed on me, something complicated crossed his face. Relief? Anxiety? Shame? Probably all 3. Amanda noticed me next. She said something to Daniel, touched his arm, and then they walked over together. Marcus looked up from the field, saw us all standing together, and his face broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen from him. Mom, Daniel said when they reached me. Just that. My name, weighted with 4 months of absence and decades of taking me for granted. Daniel, Amanda. I kept my voice neutral, warm but not desperate. I wasn't here to make them comfortable. I was here for Marcus. Amanda spoke first, her voice thick with emotion. Lena, I need to apologize to you. I've been thinking about everything, about how we treated you, and I'm so ashamed. Tears welled in her eyes. My mother is overbearing and controlling, and I was so worried about becoming like her that I didn't realize I was doing something equally cruel, making you invisible. I'm so sorry. It was the most honest thing Amanda had ever said to me. I could have held on to my anger, could have made her grovel, could have punished her for years of casual cruelty, but that would have required carrying a weight I'd traveled around the world to put down. I appreciate that, I said simply. Things will need to be different going forward. They will be, Daniel said quickly. I promise. We want you in our lives. Really in our lives. Not just when it's convenient. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who I'd sacrificed for, who'd broken my heart so completely it had forced me to rebuild myself from scratch. He looked older suddenly, like the past 4 months had aged him in ways my absence from his life had finally made visible. I want that too, I said. But Daniel, I need you to understand something. I'm not the mother I was before I left. I won't be available every time you need something while being excluded from everything that matters. I won't be the emergency contact who never gets invited to the celebration. If we're going to be family, it has to be real, messy and honest and mutual. Can you do that? He nodded, and I saw actual tears in his eyes. I want to try. I want to do better. I'm sorry it took you leaving for me to realize what I was losing. Sometimes we have to lose things to understand their value, I said quietly. I'm just glad we both figured it out before it was too late. The game started, and for the first time in years, we all sat together. Not with me off to the side, but in the middle. Daniel on one side, Amanda on the other. The 3 of us actually talking, actually present with each other. Marcus played better than I'd ever seen him. Maybe because he was having a good day, or maybe because he kept glancing into the stands and seeing all of us there together, seeing that the family he'd wanted had somehow, impossibly, begun to exist. After the game, Marcus ran over, still in his uniform, sweaty and happy. "Grandma, did you see that hit in the 5th inning? That was my best one all season." I saw it. It was incredible. I hugged him, not caring that he was dirty and sweaty, just grateful to hold this child who'd given me a reason to come home. "Can we all go out for ice cream?" Marcus asked, looking between his parents and me with hopeful eyes. Like a real family? Daniel and Amanda both looked at me, the question implicit. Was I ready for this? Could we actually do this? "Ice cream sounds perfect," I said. We went to a local place Marcus loved. Sitting at a small table meant for 4, but that somehow accommodated us all. The conversation was stilted at first. We were all learning how to talk to each other without the old scripts, without the patterns that had defined us for so long. But slowly, carefully, we began to find our way. Daniel asked about my travels with genuine curiosity, listening to my stories without checking his phone or cutting me off. Amanda shared things about her own mother that helped me understand why she'd been so protective of her family boundaries. She'd been running from one kind of dysfunction into another, and hadn't realized it until my absence made her examine what she'd created. Marcus was the bridge between us, asking questions that drew us all into the same conversation, laughing at jokes we all shared, creating moments that felt like the beginning of something real rather than the performance of family we'd been doing for years. As we were leaving, Amanda pulled me aside. "Lena, I'd like you to come to dinner, a real dinner, at our house, this Tuesday if you're free. I want to cook for you, not because I have to, but because I want to." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. That evening, alone in my apartment again, I sat on my balcony and watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded me of Greece, of Italy, of all the places I'd been that had taught me I was capable of more than I'd believed. My phone buzzed with notifications, messages from women on my blog, sharing their own updates. Helen from Toronto was in Scotland, hiking through the highlands and feeling more alive than she had in years. Rosa from Mexico had left her marriage and was rebuilding her life in a small apartment by the sea. Patricia from Ireland had told her children she was keeping her house and her independence, and they'd been shocked into actually listening to her. Dozens of stories, hundreds of them, all starting with the same basic truth. They'd chosen themselves, and that choice had changed everything. I thought about writing one final blog post, some kind of conclusion to tie everything together with a neat bow. But life wasn't neat, and the story wasn't over. It was just entering a new chapter, one where I knew my worth, where I held boundaries, where I chose myself first and invited others to join me rather than diminishing myself to fit into their lives. Instead, I opened my journal, the one Clara had given me that first day in her office, that now contained 4 months of adventures and revelations and hard-won wisdom. On a fresh page, I wrote, "I learned that invisible is a choice, not one you make consciously, but one you make every time you accept being overlooked, every time you shrink to accommodate someone else's comfort, every time you tell yourself that your needs matter less than everyone else's." I learned that love without respect is just polite hostility. That family is supposed to be the people who see you most clearly, and if they don't, you're allowed to find people who will. I learned that it's never too late to start over, that 55 isn't old, it's just the middle of a story that was waiting for me to finally become the protagonist instead of the supporting character. I learned that the world is full of kindness if you're brave enough to accept it, that strangers will help you, that communities will form around shared pain and hope, that we're all just looking for proof that we're not alone in this difficult, beautiful, heartbreaking experience of being human. But most importantly, I learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. It's the bravest thing you can do. It's the foundation that everything else must be built on. Because if you don't value yourself, you'll spend your whole life begging other people to do it for you. And that's no way to live. I spent 55 years disappearing. I spent 4 months remembering how to be seen. And now I'm spending the rest of my life making sure I never forget that I matter. Not because anyone else says so, but because I do. The following Tuesday, I drove to Daniel's house for dinner. My hands shook slightly as I pulled into the driveway. Old muscle memory, old fear that this would be like before, that nothing had really changed. But when the door opened, Marcus was there, grinning, pulling me inside with genuine enthusiasm. "Grandma, come see what I made for you." He dragged me to the kitchen, where a hand-painted sign hung over the table. "Welcome home, Grandma Lena." Amanda was cooking something that smelled incredible, and Daniel was setting the table, actual place settings with cloth napkins, not paper plates grabbed at the last minute. The dining room looked like effort had been made, like this meal mattered. "I hope you're hungry," Amanda said, smiling nervously. "I made your favorite. Marcus told me you love lasagna." I felt tears prick my eyes. She'd asked Marcus about my favorite food. She'd planned. She'd tried. "It smells wonderful," I said. Dinner was everything I'd wished for during all those years of being excluded. Real conversation, genuine laughter, questions asked and answered with actual interest. They wanted to know more about my travels, about the women I'd met, about what I was planning next. "I'm thinking about writing a book," I admitted. "Clara, the travel agent, she thinks there's a market for it. A guide for older women who want to travel solo but don't know where to start." "That's amazing, Mom," Daniel said. "You should absolutely do it. You have so much wisdom to share." Wisdom. He called it wisdom, not foolishness or a midlife crisis or any of the dismissive terms he'd used before. He saw me as someone with something valuable to offer, not just as an obligation to be managed. After dinner, Marcus showed me his room, something he'd never done before. Photos of us together were taped to his wall, printed from my blog posts. Me in front of the Acropolis, me at Machu Picchu, me on a beach in Thailand. A visual timeline of my journey that he'd been following, that had mattered to him. "I'm going to travel when I'm older," he announced. "Not just regular vacations, real traveling, like you did. I want to be brave like you. You're already brave, Marcus. And wherever you go, whatever you do, I'll be cheering you on. Will you tell me stories about all the places you went? I want to know everything. Every detail," I promised, "for as long as you want to listen." As I was leaving that night, Daniel walked me to my car. We stood in the driveway under stars that looked the same as they had in every country I'd visited, the same stars that had watched me transform from invisible to visible, from forgotten to remembered, from lost to found. "Thank you for giving us another chance," Daniel said quietly. "I know I don't deserve it." "Maybe not," I agreed. "But Marcus does. And I do. So we're trying. I'm going to do better. I promise." "I know. And Daniel, if you don't, I'll be okay. That's the difference now. I'll be disappointed, but I'll be okay. Because my happiness isn't dependent on your choices anymore. It's dependent on mine." He nodded, understanding finally settling into his features. "I'm proud of you, Mom. I should have said that sooner. I'm proud of who you've become. I'm proud of who I've always been," I corrected gently. I just finally gave myself permission to show her to the world. Driving home, I thought about the woman I'd been 4 months ago. Small, invisible, waiting for permission to exist. I thought about the moment in Parker's Market when Ryan's voice message shattered her world, setting off a chain of events that would ultimately save her life. No, not her. Me. I was that woman, but I wasn't anymore. I'd traveled around the world and found myself in the journey. I'd learned that family was both who you're born to and who you choose. I'd discovered that it's never too late to start over, to choose yourself, to remember that you matter. And I'd learned the most important truth of all. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is the worst thing that can happen to you. Sometimes you have to be broken to learn how strong you are. Sometimes you have to be discarded to discover your value. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. 2 months later, my first speaking engagement was at a women's conference in Chicago. Standing backstage, listening to the crowd noise, I felt that old fear trying to resurface. Who was I to speak to all these people? What did I have to say that mattered? Then I remembered. I was Lena Morrison. I was the woman who'd hiked mountains and crossed oceans. I was the grandmother who'd chosen herself and inspired thousands of others to do the same. I was enough. I'd always been enough. I walked onto that stage to thunderous applause, looked out at hundreds of faces, women young and old, from every background, all looking for the same thing I'd been searching for: permission to matter. "My name is Lena," I began. And until I was 55 years old, I was invisible. Tonight I'm going to tell you how I learned to be seen. But more importantly, I'm going to tell you that you're already visible. You always have been. You just need to believe it for yourself. Because here's what I learned. You can spend your whole life waiting for other people to choose you. Waiting for the invitation, the recognition, the validation that tells you you're worthy of love and attention and respect. Or you can choose yourself, and that changes everything. So if you take nothing else from tonight, take this. Choose yourself. Book the ticket. Leave the situation. Start the business. Write the book. Take the risk. Yes, people will judge you. Yes, you might fail. Yes, it's terrifying. But I promise you, the regret of staying invisible is so much worse than the fear of being seen. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to matter. Not to anyone else, but to yourself. So choose yourself. Today. Right now. This moment. The world is waiting. And so are you. The applause that followed felt like coming home. Not to a place, but to myself. To the woman I'd always been underneath the invisibility. Underneath the years of making myself small. Afterward, women lined up to talk to me. To share their stories. To thank me for giving them permission they didn't realize they'd been waiting for. Each conversation was a reminder that my pain had purpose. That the worst thing that ever happened to me had become the catalyst for helping others. And somewhere in all of that, the speaking, the writing, the continued travel, the growing relationship with Marcus, the cautious rebuilding with Daniel, I found something I'd been searching for my entire life. Not happiness exactly. Something better. Peace. The quiet knowledge that I was enough, had always been enough, and would continue to be enough regardless of who else could or couldn't see it. I'd learned to choose myself, and that choice had saved my life. If you're reading this, if you've followed my journey, if you've felt invisible or forgotten or like you don't matter, hear me. You do matter. You always have. You just need to start believing it. Choose yourself. The world is waiting, and so is the life you were always meant to live. The end. Thank you for following Lena's journey. If her story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers. Comment below with which part of Lena's story resonated with you most. And remember, it's never too late to choose yourself. See you in the next story.